Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this Civic Space TV, and this is the chat show. This is the episode that is online, and we are continuously engaging online with our panelists that we have from different spaces. Our conversation today is we are trying to analyze the economic impact of COVID-19 on Ugandans and generally the whole Ugandans. So, joined on the panel today, and also while you're trying to follow this discussion, please try to hit that YouTube subscribe part and get to the discussion. Try to subscribe. We are live on YouTube. We are live on Facebook, and the discussion will go on as discussed live. And also, since we are discussing the economic impact, joined on the panel today is my special guests that we've tried to get from across the spectrum and also the professions. I will need to look straight on the as presented by the screen. I'll start with Victoria. Victoria is Nannozi, is the executive director of the Association of Real Estate Agents, Uganda area. Victoria, good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you too. Glad to be here with you now.
Thank you very much. From Victoria is Clare Ruhweza. Clare is she's a real estate professional with Southgate Consulting. Clare, good to see you. Your audio is well, Clare?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now. Yes.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you very much, Claire. Try to check with your connections so that you don't get lost.
Sorry, someone tried to call me. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Oh, understandable. Yes. Then from Claire, finally we have our other panelists, Eddie Nsamba Gayiiya. Eddie is a land economist, a senior registered valuer, and an international land and real estate consultant. Eddie, good to see you. Eddie, you need to turn on your audio so that we can hear from you.
Hello?
Good to see you, Eddie.
Good to hear from you. Good to see you. How are you doing?
Very fine. How are you?
The lockdown is not good for many of us. Maybe it's okay for you.
We are in the what we call struggle. We're still in the same struggle. So you need you need to get a more stable place so that because this is a recorded engagement that is on TV, so you need to be in one stable place and have the discussion flow.
Okay.
Yes, right from Eddie, we have Suuna Robert. Suuna Robert is a tax, trade, and investment consultant. And Suuna, good to see you again. This is, I think, your second time on Civic Space TV. Suuna, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. I just didn't seem to hear the last words. I only heard my name, but it's okay. Thank you for inviting me.
I was trying to introduce you as a tax, trade, and investment consultant. Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much for inviting me, and greetings all our viewers.
Yeah, and thank you for turning up again for a second time. Thank you for honoring our invitations always.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes, and finally on the call is Council Sarah Bireete. She's the executive director with the for constitutional governance and our regular panelists. You're welcome.
Thank you, Demiano, and good afternoon, fellow panelists.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think we shall not wait for Rugyendo, and once he gets in, then we shall see him off also. So right into the discussion, I need to first invite, because I need to just the discussion into context. We see there's increase in the by nearly half for the financial year 2019-2020, and with further uncertainties into this year, 2020-2021, this increases the likelihood of the rise of in poverty, reduction or in their income, remittances, loss of market, and demand for domestic products. There is a growing public expenditure not linked to COVID-19. The budget expenditures for 2020-21 have grown compared to that of 2019-2020. However, the increase does not seem to be driven by anticipated cost of COVID-19 response measures of 2020-2021. The structure of the current budget remains largely similar to the previous financial year, despite, of course, the overwhelming impact of the pandemic on Uganda's economy and the resource basket of 2020-2021. Works, of course, works, security remain one of the biggest earners into the budget. This reflects the same patterns of the previous year. Of course, we expect major shortfalls in domestic revenues, while total revenues is expected to grow. Uganda's revenue collection will be affected by the pandemic. Major shortfalls have already been registered in 2019-2020. There are also projections for declines in the 2020-2021 targets. These projections are based on situations where the virus is quickly, of course, contained, but these shortfalls could significantly exceed projections of the current control measures. I'm trying to bring the discussion into context and also bring I think at this point is where we need to bring in Suuna, our tax consultant, and you're well versed with these issues. I want you to just give us a general analysis of the economic impact of the pandemic on Ugandans.
Yeah, thank you very much for starting off the discussion and in that context. I think, like you said, I'll give a more high-level, broad impacts of the pandemic. Looking at the major indicators of the before we entered into the second lockdown of the 42 days, and I pray and hope it doesn't extend beyond 42 days, we had thought the large impact of the COVID-19 pandemic had started to be cushioned and was picking up. Sectors were trying to pick up from where they had been growing. Of course, we know that by 2020, we saw a very big decline in the projected GDP growth to about 3%. But as we started picking up from the impact of the previous year, again, we came to realize that actually there is another lockdown cut us off the second wave. Of course, we can't afford to emphasize the impact on the services sector, tourism, transportation. Of course, the wholesale and retail sectors, we saw a decline in the import volumes and values, even the export volumes and values. We saw over 780,000 individuals falling back into the poverty trap, the poverty line. All this was from November 2019 to the late 2020. Then, as we are trying to recover and the projections of the economy, we are being projected to rise in this year 2021. The wave comes in, and then we see another lockdown. So, what does that now? What does now that mean to the entire economy? Of course, that means the earlier projections of growth will remain stagnant if they don't decline. We are seeing more people again going back to the poverty line. The positives about the pandemic may come from challenging our government to think of import substitution strategies. that will substitute the the imports that were coming in. And of course, we saw some waivers in the name of stimulus packages being instituted to support the manufacturing sector. However, those are being disputable by who are the actual beneficiaries, and that one, my other panelists may venture into it. On the side of the foreign direct investment, of course, we do not expect lots of decline, because we know there is much activity going on in the oil and gas sector. So I expect much activity in that line, given that there is a lot of activity, especially with the signing of the agreements between Uganda and TZ for the pipeline. So that sector may continue attracting foreign direct investment. We don't see much trouble there, but we need to refocus our efforts on re-energizing our private sector, which has largely been impacted upon, especially the medium and small scale enterprises. For instance, when we look at the increased borrowing by government on the domestic level to support or to cushion the economy against the adverse effects of COVID-19, we have seen government float more of treasury bonds and treasury bills on the market to be bought by the private sector. However, when we analyze that, we find out that even the commercial banks are more interested in lending to government as opposed to private individuals, for reasons known to both you and me, that the government is less riskier to lend to than the individual. So what happens now is that at the end of the day, when the private sector cannot access credit, it is very difficult for them to stimulate production within the economy. So increased the borrowing by the government from the private sector being dominated by a commercial bank as opposed to individuals, it implies that there will be a crowding out effect of the private sector, and that is not very good for an economy that is struggling like Uganda. So recovery from the impacts of the COVID-19 may take longer than expected. We are of course happy about the interventions by government, specifically, for instance, the investment in the Uganda Development Bank, which needs about 103 billion to put presentation for long-term financing, and of course support some import substitution strategies and other key sectors. I think that would be very good. To the extent that that money is equitably used is another question that needs to be observed and monitored. But it would be a good venture in my own opinion to support the private sector. Now, another issue that requires attention in terms of access to financing, especially for the private sector, is to the intervention made by the central continuous lowering of lowers the central bank rate. It would enable commercial banks to lend at a lower rate to private sector, and the reverse has been true. The central bank has got interest rates to individuals in commercial banks are stagnating at about 17.5%. On average. So there's that mismatch. The central bank is trying to, while the commercial bank are not retaliating the greater attention and urgent attention if we are to resuscitate the economy through support of the private sector. Another issue maybe that I can do with the give to pay domestic areas. I think that is a nice move, because there is a lot to be there. As next year's budget, this year's budget, to pay and to release in the first quarter all the money that it owes to the private sector. I think that is, to me, is a good move that should be upheld. Now, in the last factor that I wanted to talk about is to do with issues that are not necessarily addressing the budget, things that we are calling budget neutral. I'm happy that actually the government has made efforts to reduce expenditures within the ministries, and that's where you saw they were able to table a supplementary budget of 600 billion. The thinking behind that is that through budget cuts from the different ministries and agencies, government has been able to save about 500 billion for flights, conferences, teas that are being taken by different committees in the ministries, to shoulder the burden that is being created by this supplementary budgets. Because my experience with the revenue administration has been that whenever a given ministry, department, or agency requests for a supplementary budget, it goes down to the Uganda Revenue Authority, because our government is hand to mouth also. It's vulnerable, like we have the vulnerable people of the Nabanja's case. What URA collects is actually what the government spends. So previous experiences have been that whenever there is a supplementary budget request, it is followed by an increase in the revenue targets for the Uganda Revenue Authority. And that's when the URA officials will increase their effort and correct as much as they can, including means that are not very favorable for the private sector. So those are some of the issues I think that I thought can be looked at to set the discussion going. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Suuna, for giving us that broad kind of engagement, and also for discussion, especially from the side of economics, and being that that is your area. I need to also bring the perspective of try to capture the perspective of people that are really involved in the private sector, and especially on issues with the landlords and the tenants, and really people that are affected in this situation here. I need to bring in quickly Clare. Yeah, I don't know whether you're listening. Yes. So Clare, I just want you to just give us the real the analysis of this situation, especially in your sub sector where you are, where you're really working.
Okay, thank you so much, Demiano. Thank you, fellow panelists, for being here. Once again, my name is Clare Ruhweza, and I work as an architectural associate with Southgate Consulting. I've also been working with a number of real estate firms, from Knight Frank to Southgate Properties. There was a firm called In Situ, and I've also been handling facilities, so working directly with landlords and tenants for the last 19 years. I currently work with Mato Concepts as their MD, and so it's a pleasure to be here to discuss the market and to share my views on what is happening. First of all, the pandemic has also hit the real estate market very badly. But that said, we saw with the first wave that when the lockdown happened, there was actually a scramble for people buying land. And this was based on intel we got from brokers we work very closely with. They said there was a sudden surge in land transactions, which is surprising, but that is what happened. However, we saw a sharp decline in the office space. So as a market, it was, it was an interesting dynamic. And landlords who have office space suffered gravely because, of course, people were sent home. And even after the lockdown was lifted, the numbers of people who were returning to the office space, especially in the CBD, was so much smaller. Instead, we saw an influx of people moving to take up space in the suburbs. And so buildings which previously did not have offices in the suburbs started to have interest as people wanted to work from places where they could easily walk back home. Now, that said, on the residential side, of course, the pandemic hit again the high-end market for residential properties, especially as those favor expatriates. And you know that when the pandemic hit, many people decided to go back home. So even the expatriates, many of them started leaving the country. And as a result, we had an increase in vacancies on that side. On the middle and lower income side, I would say that for the very low income, because many of them rely on what I would call daily bread, and many of them left the cities every time there was a lockdown or a pending lockdown, because many of them cannot manage. They don't have savings. If they have no income, they cannot survive. So many of them ended up migrating out of the city and going back home to villages. And I think you remember in the news reports of people walking for miles and miles going back home. In this second wave of the lockdown, it was again, I think it has been harsher for us as a real estate market. And this has been further exacerbated on the residential side, as people, you're demanding rents for us as property managers, and yet tenants tell you, we have no money, and we have nowhere to go. We can't even move. So we've had very frustrating experience having to manage landlord expectations in this season, because here we are as property managers telling them the tenants are not paying, but we cannot also evict them. I think in the last lockdown, the president issued a directive that people cannot easily be evicted. Instead, he was requesting that landlords be considerate of tenants and offer grace. The challenge we have is many of these landlords, whether in the residential market, whether in the commercial market, have borrowed from banks. So they have obligations to pay. And the banks were asked to be kind, but I don't know how that plays out for them, because even for banks, they have borrowed that money either from depositor or from government. So what happened is that the banks were willing to give a bit of a breather in terms of when payments would be made, but that was it. So if someone was given a 6 months holiday from paying their interests, the money still remained. So it accumulated, and in fact, we are seeing landlords now beginning to sell properties because they can't cope. The problem is we are in a buyer's market. Nobody's willing to buy this time, not even land. Land is not selling as the way it was doing in the last lockdown, because suddenly people have been faced with very high medical bills. So even the person who has a little money that they could have invested is concerned about what would happen if they found themselves needing medical support. So people are holding on to money in favor of health, in favor of pay. Really has taken a bit of a backseat. But that said, we are still working. We are mindful also of the new tax regime, which URA is saying is better than the previous one, where we were paying 20%. We have now been increased to 30%. But they are saying that as a result of increasing the percentage, they've also given us leeway to be able to take off up to 75% in expenses. But of course, you take them off when there's evidence. It's not like you just say, I spent, you must have your records very well kept. So for those of us in the market, we are just praying and hoping that government will, instead of just issuing directives, that there will be understanding, especially of landlords, because the landlords.
Thank you.
Sorry? Hello?
Yeah, thank you, Claire. I'll get back. I'll get back to you, and we try to digress those specifics in the course of the discussion. Let me try to also bring in on Sarah. Sarah, I just want you to also share your general perspective and your general analysis on this economic impact on the citizens, and especially from your side, since you're so grounded with the people across board and your advocacy.
Well, thank you, Damien. I don't know what people I'm familiar with. We normally work with the vulnerable and indigent people, the people that need a voice, the people that need uplifting. And unfortunately, these are the people that are worst hit by COVID, both in terms of healthcare, in terms of livelihood. So when you have a pandemic that is affecting lives and livelihood, you cannot sustain a healthy economy unless you have clear mitigation factors to save both lives and livelihood as a country. If you look at the way we are proceeding today, I think we are shabby at both fronts as a country. We are neither saving lives and nor are we saving livelihoods. We have seen a range of policy interventions by other countries globally on how they are mitigating the severe effects of COVID pandemic. Most of them have rolled out testing, treatment, immunization, save lives, but also clear stimulus packages, coupled with waivers, with packages for maintaining cash flow, with packages for saving jobs, hence saving the economy and society. On the contrary, we have had knee-jerk interventions, especially on the side of the economy in the first phase of COVID. We saw money pumped into UDB meant for small and medium enterprises, but as usual, as government is enacting a policy, the mafia jump in and create ghost companies and parade their own companies to be beneficiaries. So however much money you pump in with the level of corruption and thuggery, it can never go to genuine intended beneficiaries. It will always find its hands in the cartel network, you know, of the mafia. And that was witnessed with a ghost list of UDB shamelessly, with what is happening in the creative industry, where the money was put under Operation Wealth Creation and is being dumped at those who are aggressive and can access genocide. You hear individuals are given up to a tune of 500 million. Associations are given 100 million with so much membership. And you wonder whether there is any sensible criteria or any sensible and meaningful, genuine effort to salvage the creative industry in this country. We saw examples of ghosts on the relief package that was launched today. The first recipient in Guru, when he received a call, he first said he's a farmer, and we know farmers are the holders of real economy and are not intended beneficiaries in this relief package. Then later he quickly changed and said he's a border rider. So you don't even know what he is and whether he was really vulnerable to the extent of receiving this small money. So, but away from that, we see the rising public debt. I think as of today, it's at 55%, way above the recommended threshold of GDP of 50%. So we crossed the red line. We saw the heavy borrowing of soft loans and grants in the first phase of COVID, and citizens' hearts were broken of wastage, abuse, and theft by the Auditor General's report. So many questions are unanswered, and so many things were not done in that phase. Clare did mention the surge in land transactions. All lawyers who work on land were busiest during the first lockdown. Some of them say they have never made such money like they made in the first lockdown, and all people were buying land. If you are in an area where a government official had an unbuilt plot, I saw a huge storage house being built in 2 months of lockdown by somebody who works with the Ministry of Works. So that demonstrates the level of thuggery, and the genesis of query is raised by Auditor General. Money meant to save lives was just squandered. In today's monitor, the president is, I don't know whether even a president is really going by the stature of our constitution as a fountain of honor should threaten. But the president is threatening to arrest the health officials over fluctuation of prices, including for oxygen installation. But why should the president merely threaten when people are dying for lack of oxygen in hospitals instead of acting? But that is now a governance question. Let me go back to, to the economics. We have a mismatch between people's needs and government priorities and actions. And that is explained in the way even the pandemic is being handled. Increasing poverty, I think the UBOS report put our statistics of people who fell back into poverty at 1.8 million. And then we have a shrinking tax base. The experts are here. I'm not going to deliver much in that. You have a shrinking tax base because of shrinking revenues. And then you have introduction of new taxes, which is a clear departure as compared to what other countries are doing to salvage their economies. Countries are pumping money into citizenry, the businesses, save jobs, because when you save jobs, you save a life cycle of taxation. Just in the first report after lockdown, we know that 80% of our national economy is generated from the Kampala metropolitan. And the majority creators of the economy in Kampala is industries and service. And just in the two sectors, there was 60% loss of jobs. When you have 60% loss of jobs, you lose a cycle of taxes, of taxpayers. People paying pay as you earn, people paying income tax, and you cannot regain this income unless you salvage jobs as a country. And I can assure you that as of today, nobody is thinking in this direction in our country, and this is very unfortunate. There is no genuine effort to save the cash flow in businesses, and we are going to be in a worse economic situation. So there is no effort to build economic resilience in this country. This is very unfortunate. Maybe as I conclude, I can only say that in a public health emergency, you must save lives and livelihood to salvage the nation.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sarah. And of course, you've hinted on issues of UDB organization. You're saying strengthening the economy and all that. I think we'll need to go a little deeper into that in the second segment of our conversation. But just right up this time, I also need to invite in Victoria to just share with us from the perspective of as real estate agencies and those that are working around the landlords, and perspective of the landlord and tenants relation in the amidst the pandemic.
Thank you very much for this invitation, first of all, and for highlighting this very important call, especially right now. I want to thank the people who have spoken before me, and especially Clare for highlighting the plight of the real estate sector. She has stated exactly what we are going through as the real estate sector currently. at the moment. We appreciate the fact, yes, we had the previous lockdown last year. It came at a time when many of us were not prepared, and yes, we appreciate what we went through, the loss of income, loss of jobs, and everything that we went through. The second lockdown came at a time when we felt like, yes, we have appreciated the situation that we are in. How do we move from where we are to the next level? I remember in the previous lockdown, we encouraged like the landlords, the tenants, we encouraged them to have dialogue amongst themselves, so to find amicable solutions. How do we move forward? We appreciated the fact that, yes, these are our tenants, we've been with them probably 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, and all that. Then how can we move from where we are to the next level? So we encourage the tenants to have dialogues, to meet with their landlords and come up with strategies on how they can work together. And many landlords came up with strategies. We remember some waived rent, some deferred payments, some gave opportunities. They gave opportunities to their tenants so that they can be able to maneuver through that particular period. But now, currently, we are at a point whereby we actually are very concerned about what is going on. But what I wanted to highlight mainly, like right now, we appreciate the fact that the real estate sector is like the backbone. It's the sector that holds many other sectors together. We appreciate we cannot have the thriving tourism sector without a viable real estate sector. The hospitality sector, the education sector, infrastructure, they all ride on the real estate sector. But our main concern, like for example, currently we find that the real estate sector is the sector that is forgotten. You'd find that when they are apportioning, like for example, the stimulus packages, the real estate sector is not thought about. It's a forgotten sector. Yet I know it's still a growing sector, so it has a lot of opportunities for growth. We appreciate the fact that investment in the real estate sector is secure investment. So it is a sector that really needs to be looked into seriously in order to boost the economy currently. Yeah. Cannot say much.
Thank you very much, Victoria, for that brief into that. I just finally I need to onto this discussion. I just need to bring on Eddie quickly, and because you of course into issues of land, and I'm seeing there's the issues that are coming about on how the real estate cuts across the economy, but also we want to know how are you. That also hinted that your area was hot cake. People were rushing into buying land and all this. As a valuer of land, did you see this happening? And do we see that was there an impact on your business around COVID?
Thank you very much. Now, I'm going to be talking as a professional in the land and the real estate sectors, and as a valuer at the same time. As I do, I want to say that we have a problem because we lack statistics. I know Knight Frank has come out to issue some 2 reports. And I think Bank of Uganda or something had a report on how the prices were moving. I'm not very sure about the boom in selling land in the first close down. But talking about what is happening now, at least in the last 6 months, because I practice in this, and I also invest in land, buying and selling. It is bad. It is extremely bad. I haven't gone into the factors why it is bad, but because I think the future is not bright at all. Why would you want to buy land when you cannot develop it, or when you develop it and you cannot make returns on it? And this brings me to the rentals and so on and so forth. If you look at what is happening in the Central Business District or in Kampala, the commercial area, it is bad. The voids are very, very, very high. The vacancies are very, very, very high. And the rents are really bound to come down. So the investment. And when you look at the banks, nobody has been talking about the financial institutions which are lending. Somebody was saying they're a bit crowded out because, the private sector will be crowded out because the banks are lending a lot to government. If I was in the financial sector, I would do that exactly, because why would you want to lend to a sector, other sectors which cannot pay back? The loan performance, what is it called? Is very, very bad. The statistics, I don't have ready hand statistics. But you see, even before these 42 days, which we are grappling with it, now, the banks, they have a lot of property which they cannot sell. They are not buyers. And who will buy and do what? Because if you can't get the rental, if you can't get the rentals from the residential properties, from the industrial properties, from the commercial properties, why would you buy? The professionals who are working in the sector, for us, I think we are very vulnerable, by the way. And Nabanja should also consider us, because you see, if the bank is not giving me instructions to do valuation, how do I also run my farm? I have a farm, by the way. I didn't talk a lot about myself. I have a farm, a valuation farm, and I have people I employ in this. Been talking about the stimulus, economic stimulus for many things, but you see, when you look at this stimulus, the way they are being tailored, it's very, very artificial. Nobody is analyzing the impact that some of these sectors have. One last point I want to make is about the policy and the law. I think if you have people who are, when you have landlords, and somebody was talking about the new income tax act, which raised the taxation from 20 to 30%, and then raised the deductions from whatever, and they capped it to 75%. But 75%, the majority of the people who are owning real estate here do not keep any records. And you want them now to first give the details on how much they have spent. So you give, and you have raised the rate of taxation from 20 to 30%. That is going to have a terrible impact on the economy. KCCA is taxing through property rates. It's government. URA is taxing rental income tax. These are government agencies, and nobody is thinking about what the other hand is doing. And then you just come and say, okay, we are going to and then you raise the taxation rate to 30%. This is going to have a lot of impact on real estate. One last point is about the future. What is the future? When you look at the budget, for example, the budget is talking about a lot of many things, but they are not talking about even the real estate sector. I don't see anything there. They talk about agriculture, and somebody was just telling us UDP is not even putting the money in the agriculture sector, the productive sector, and so on and so forth. So I see things that are very bad. And why, as a policy matter, policy issue. Why don't you tell URA to waive rental income tax? Direct them to waive for 6 months. And direct also KCCA to waive the rental, the property rates for 3 to 6 months, so that the property owners can also recover, can recover and resume, because now things are very bad. I'll come in later for other points, but that's what I have now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eddie. That was good, and you've hinted on the issue of the budget not responding to the real estate. I want to invite in Robert again. Robert, I want you to just give us your understanding or what you picked out from this budget. Do you think the budget really is responding to the socioeconomic well-being of the people? But also there are issues that come out closely, especially issues on domestic borrowing by government. Or what's its impact on the private sector? You need to unmute. Try to unmute.
Sorry about that. First of all, you must accept, to put it into context, you must accept, first of all, that this budget, as a technical paper, the way Mr. President loves to call it, was written before the second lockdown. So whatever was included in the budget at the time, I don't think gave much attention on anticipation of another second wave of coronavirus. Now, just immediately after it's being read, we get into a second lockdown. Now, whatever is being done, let's accept that it's firefighting, because the national budget, as was earlier written, was actually trying to address post-COVID, not pre. And now we get to a second wave, and it comes when we have just read the budget. So we must understand that aspect first of all. So the content of the budget as was read was actually trying to see how the economy shall recover from the impact of COVID-19 as at the end of 2020 financial year. Now we are hit immediately after reading the budget. So that again has an impact on how the government intends to conduct its business based on the budget in the next financial year. And we are not surprised by the supplementaries that are coming through, because they had not been anticipated in the previous budget. But that said, like I've always commented about our budget, and I'm always excited about the themes we give our budget. Industrialization for wealth and job creation. I mean, very exciting semantics. Now, to the extent that the content addresses the real needs of the people on ground, leaves a lot to desire. And as my senior colleague Eddie Nsamba has told you, how much, for instance, goes to the real estate sector, which has been, if you're saying you're telling the landlords not to demand from the tenants, what have you put in place for them? You see, maybe the positive bit that I loved about our budget is, of course, the idea of trying to consider that instead of having a sector-based budgeting, we're having a program-based budgeting. Now, if you have issues like Myoga, if you have programs like a parish model, if you have allocations to Uganda Development Bank, they sound on a policy paper, they sound very interesting packages, and that are really good at shouldering the impact of the pandemic. How do we monitor those programs to ensure that they deliver what they are intended to deliver? Okay, that's the challenge. I was hearing the Minister of Finance himself when he was launching the money we borrowed from IMF, telling people that, warning financial officers that they should not steal this money, which means that he's aware of the theft that goes into this activity. You see, you're talking about industrialization, agro-processing, and the rest, but we are all planning this before the second wave. Like Sarah has told you in the earlier submission, our drive of the economy beyond the financial sector and the telecoms has been the wholesales and retail sector. But how big, in terms of contribution to revenue, if you remove financial sector, financial services sector, and the telecom sector, the next sector will be wholesale and retail. How active has this sector been in terms of economic productivity? They were just getting recovery from the past lockdown. Now they are locked down again. So I would have loved to see the budget that is going into support of that particular sector, instead of giving direct handouts. It's good to give direct handouts to individuals in the name of the vulnerable community, but is that sustainable for a country like Uganda? To me, it is not a sustainable approach. And secondly, the non-budget issues that I talked about when I was starting this discussion have not been considered. Issues to do with reducing bureaucracy and red tape. Why should, for instance, an individual who belongs to a manufacturer go to negotiate a tax waiver or credit to the minister or to the president when they have an association? How sure is he that his needs will be addressed? So these are some of the issues. There are lots of non-budgetary issues that need to be addressed, especially when you refer to the auditor report and the rest. Procurement, how is the procurement process? See, these are all the issues that we need to address. The budget in its essence is not a bad paper, for instance, but on ground, how is it impacting the people who are being affected by the community? And in my own opinion, we are not likely to see that take effect very soon. Regarding the
Robert, are you still with us? As Robert gets on, Sarah, right there, I want you to just come in and just, Robert talked about the issue of the supplementary budget, and I want you to just chip in. What needs to be done in the reallocation of these resources? I also saw Eddie here hinting on
because the private sector is risky to get to. My apologies. I'm using my phone to tell that someone was trying to make a direct call. But I was saying, no matter how much intervention the central bank makes by reducing the central bank rate, it is very difficult for the commercial bank to reciprocate by reducing their interest rates, because the people they are lending to are ready to lend to, because they are not very sure about their payment terms. So they would rather lend to the government itself through treasury bills and bonds. That's rational in terms of business. So what we would have seen is, for instance, if the people had enough power to borrow from the commercial banks, maybe we would see the rates going low. But are the people they are lending to empowered to have that mass to borrow? That's what we need to consider. But I'm also happy to report that in part for issues of restructuring, and both Clare and Eddie highlighted about this matter. Commercial banks have been responsive, at least in restructuring loans. Of course, they are not saying they have eliminated the loans, but they have restructured them by pushing. And I'm happy. I was recently Minister of Finance. The extension has been made from April this year to up to September to allow commercial banks to restructure more loans to support those borrowers. So I think I could stop at that, but maybe another response I would like to give to the idea of the current tax policy vis-a-vis the real estate sector, if you can allow me a minute or two, is that it is a double-edged sword, in my own opinion. On one part, it is saying we are allowing you expenses for income tax purposes of rental income up to 75%. a good move. I mean, if everyone would love it, it would reduce. They would love to reduce their. They would love to increase their expenses as much as possible. The challenge in this, the catch 22 in this policy is the threshold for rental income tax has been removed. The last threshold was 2.82 million annually. If you're earning that income, you pay rental tax. Now there's no threshold. It means even if you're having a small kazigo, you are expected to keep books of accounts and account for expenses to be able to benefit from the tax policy. So that's the catch 22. So there will be many people coming on board. Of course, administratively, it is coming administratively a burden to both the revenue authority and also to the owners of those small rental units, because you are expected to account and show that to merit for this 75% reduction in expenses, I actually spent it. You see? So those are some of the dynamics. The policy is designed in a way that it will catch some guys, but it's likely to burden others, in which case the sector itself gets into trouble, especially the sector, and you've always heard me comment on this, the real estate sector is largely informal. It is not yet well regulated to manage such policy changes. And unless we go, and I think that's what URA is trying to do by saying that even a person who owns 12 units, which are paying 120,000 a year, is supposed to keep books of accounts to benefit from these benefits. And maybe they're trying to encourage formalization, but is that possible in a context of Uganda? That's another question to answer. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Suuna. Somewhere I thought I'd invited in Sarah, but then the network must have interrupted. Sarah, I want to bring you on. Suuna hints on the issue of the supplementary budgets, but also Eddie, I saw Eddie talking about the issue of URA and the waivers that needs to be granted. So at this point, I want to ask, what needs to be done in this reallocation of resources around this point of the pandemic? What needs to be done first?
Yeah, Demiano, what is very urgent and critical is to contain the pandemic. Contain the pandemic, we need to immunize about 70% of eligible population to build herd immunity. We need to have facilities for testing and treating all COVID patients and victims. So government has to remove all financial barriers to access to medical care for COVID. So how do we need to do that? We need money. We cannot depend on handouts. We need money to immunize about 21 million adults in this country. We need money to avail testing and essential drugs for COVID, including oxygen and PPEs for health workers. We need money after you have saved lives. Now you need to look at saving livelihood and the purchasing power parity of Ugandans to salvage the economy. According to Uganda National Household Survey of 2016-2017, we have 21 million Ugandans in the middle income class. But the biggest category of these 21.3 million are in what is known as the floating class, and these are 61%. The floating class are vulnerable, and by the time we get out of the second wave, they will have slipped back away from the lower middle income, away from the middle income class category. Then we have 33% in lower middle income class. Out of the severe impact of the pandemic, this 33% is going to float into the floating class, and we have 6% in the upper middle class. If these upper middle class are not government workers that have access to illegal money, by the time we get out of the pandemic, they will be in lower middle income class. And the economics, I am really talking as an ordinary person, I'm not an economist, but the economists can either confirm or refute my assertions on how each category of Ugandans is going to slip back an economic class lower by the time we finish the pandemic, if no serious interventions are done to save businesses, to save jobs, to save and preserve the purchasing power parity and salvage the economy. If we break down our key economic contributors, you have the industries, the service industry, you have the agricultural sector, you have tourism, you have people in trade, small and medium income enterprises. And a quick look, so far in the lockdown, the price of matoke has fallen up to 2,000, between 500 to 2,000 shillings up country because of lack of transportation to bring matoke to town. If you look at the tourism sector, really the tourism sector and international travel, I think is operating at between 5 to 10% capacity. If you look at the jobs, businesses, you know, arcades are closing in town, arcades are empty, offices are closing, the rental people have told us. If you look at the impact on low-income earners, the informal sector, who, you know, people outside the 68% money economy, in lockdown, majority of them are going to lose businesses. We saw stands in Chikuba being demolished by security. People have an income, stock income of about $1 million. Half of that money is gone in lockdown through consumption, medical and other costs. You have, you know, generally this category of our economy, border, normally we call it border economy for us in the civil society. But borders, other than transporting goods, are in lockdown. Look at tax operators. So how are we planning for our country, for our citizens? I do not see any blueprint of a stimulus package. Even if economists, we have various super economists and technocrats, even if they came up with a blueprint to salvage these categories of the economy, do we have the required governance to ensure that help goes to those intended to receive it? Half of it will be in the hands of the mafia and crooks. So once you have a collapse on governance, you cannot make any meaningful intervention to get out of a COVID crisis like we are in today.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. Those are detailed and of course on point to provoke us further. I just want to bring in Clare and possibly Victoria will also try to engage on this. Sarah hints on issues and she also highlights on the sectors and the segment and the kind of people that are affected. So we've seen increased unemployment, of course, from the formal and informal workers, and of course with closure of businesses. Claire talked about people shifting from CBD to closer to the areas of where they stay, where they can work. Are we seeing which interventions do you have, you people who are in this sector, that is trying to engage government to try to see that at least there is harmony, that you don't later further see that the unemployed are again rendered homeless in this situation, yet you need to survive in this pandemic as sector players also?
Thank you, Demian. I think the person who would respond on... Hello?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can hear you, yes.
The person who I think would respond on government engagement with regards to our sector would probably be Victoria, since she represents the Association of Real Estate Agents. So I will give her audience on that. Victoria, please, if you can step in.
Yeah, thank you so much, Claire, and our moderator.
Yes, they have sent
Yes,
it to you.
as has been highlighted, the real estate sector, we are doing very, very badly as a sector. But then, as an association, probably, the association is called AREA, Association of Real Estate Agents. The association brings together all practitioners in the real estate sector. And one of our mandates is to advocate for the real estate sector. Yeah, we've tried to do many things. We've tried to engage government. One of the concerns that was raised in this particular meeting was the lack of regulation. We'll note that it's something that is high on our agenda. We are pushing for more regulation. For example, currently we are advocating for the real estate agents bill to try, we all appreciate, yes, there's a part that the government plays, there's a part that the practitioners play, but then there's a part that also agents that link the landlords and the tenants, that they also play, that affects the prices on the market in the real estate sector. So we are trying to advocate for that particular bill currently. But to talk about the effects of COVID-19 on the real estate sector, yes, there have been issues like Clare has raised and many and the other participants about, for example, like the taxes, the different taxes, that especially now, actually, one of the practitioners in the real estate, in one of the meetings that we were in, she was like, you people, we are getting this, the URA people on our case. They're not giving us space and all those other things. So that is what is happening. The kids are closed, people are not working, people are at home, and yet you actually, I hope you saw in the newspapers where also KCCA was alerting the landlords, the property managers to pay property tax. Right? The time is now. We assessed you in February to March. It's the time when you're supposed to be paying the property tax. But then it's at a point whereby people are at home, people are not earning, the arcades are empty, the hotel people are also complaining and all of that things. So anyway, we are trying to engage KCCA and also URA to see if they can give a waiver or restructure the taxes for the industry to cushion it, for it to be able to sail through this particular period until when things normalize. That is currently what we are trying to do, and hopefully something will come out. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Of course, Victoria, you've hinted on that. I want to bring in Eddie. Do you think there are available options further that can guide this kind of engagement with government?
Well, I want to thank you very much for getting me back to the discussions. It's not enough for the president to go appealing to the landlords to be kind to tenants. You see? What have they done as government? Actually, as somebody from why? I mean, they are very greedy, taxing everybody. Why don't the waiver is a very serious matter, by the way. If government can waive the income tax, rental income tax, that is through the central government, URA, and also waive the property rates for local governments for a minimum of 3 months, so that these sectors can, the real estate sector can recover. Number two, even the law itself, that threshold of which was removed, and then raising the expenditure which is allowed to 75%, these are silly things. Why doesn't government come out to say 50%, you don't have to explain how you spent the money on maintaining the property or what have you? The rental property, the rental sector, How do you expect people in Kisasi, people in Komamboga to start having books of accounts? These are certain things which can, I'm now talking about even the law itself, which you can look at after the COVID. But this lockdown, people are suffering. One last point here. Why don't you look at the water tariffs? Remember, I know government, there's a concession actually. Government owns but then there's a concession. Why don't you negotiate tariffs again so that you don't just look at 100,000 given to vulnerable? Even not vulnerable people are not even getting the 100,000. So that at least the people can breathe. People are dying. Even some of us who think we have money, we are so squeezed. Some of us who have worked a long time because the tenants are not even paying us. Some of us who have invested, now I'm talking of as an investor. So try to waive some of these things, reduce them, so that the sectors, the real estate sector can also come back on its feet. These are things government can do and can announce in one night. Instead of trying to say the 12, how many categories of vulnerable people? Even the categories, they have not exhausted the categories. I'm also vulnerable now because they have given me with a bill, which I cannot even pay. So things are very bad. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eddie. And Robert, you know, the issues that are coming out and are highly economic, and I want you to constantly interject. There is this pressure on URA on waiver, but also we've seen companies struggling with now areas, and you know, they've not been filing returns for quite some time now. There's this interruption, and quite a lot of these businesses down there have this problem. Tell us on the government interventions relating to these domestic tax areas.
Thank you very much. So I really understand. Okay, you ask a question that is multifaceted. One are domestic tax areas by the government, which I've already alluded to, that the government has committed to pay them in the first quarter. You know, the original practice was government waits for the areas to accumulate. And this, when I'm talking about domestic government areas, are those government owes the suppliers money and they have not yet cleared it. And that is working capital for the private sector. Now, the original practice has been government waits for the money to accumulate for so many years to a big tune. And here in their budget statement, the government indicates all government areas up to this financial year have been waived. So the government excuses itself from paying those areas, which is terrible. Now, what they have done is that actually within the budget, they have allocated finances to pay all money that government owes to its suppliers so that they can continue with business. But also, the Uganda Revenue Authority also removed penalties and interest on the areas that the private sector or the people were owing and the companies were owing to the Uganda Revenue Authority. There's some bit of amnesty that it provided to show that the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, how long this can be extended depends on how we anticipate COVID-19 to be, and that points us to Sarah's submission earlier on that first of all is immunize as many people as possible, because all these interventions were done last year. To the extent that they will be carried into the next financial year is still questionable and debatable, because government did not seem to have anticipated the second wave of coronavirus. It seems to have hit us unsurprisingly. In other words, we are playing hide and seek with both the interventions and the pandemic itself. to the extent that you say, now the cases are increasing, let's lock down. Now the cases are reducing, let us open up. That lack of a non-sustainable plan and predictability of the likely impact of the pandemic, if it continues, is still missing. We do not have a sustainable plan to manage the adverse impacts of the economy, of the pandemic on the economy, on the livelihoods, on employment, and the rest of the vulnerable communities. That's why I say all these short-term measures are dependent on how long COVID is here to stay. You see, so if it is to remain here, I'm looking at the pressure on the Uganda Revenue Authority rising. For instance, if the real estate sector comes out asking for a waiver, and then another sector will also say we need a waiver, and then the government says we need taxes. Which people will the Uganda Revenue Authority tax, for instance? So those are some of the dynamics. It goes back to the planning stage. Is the government really aligning its priorities to the needs of its people? If COVID is not the only pandemic and there comes another, are we in position to manage it? That's what we should be working on: long-term, sustainable interventions, not short-term issues that are meant to handle smaller effects, adverse effects of pandemics. If we work on that long-term arrangement, then I think some of these issues that are being raised by guys from the actors from all sectors can be addressed. Because I want to tell you, it's not only the real estate that is suffering. Everyone is okay. We can admit that in the tourism sector, there are quite some waivers which are not in the real estate sector, but there are other sectors that are also suffering that may request for waivers in the tax. Now, where will the government get the money? Shall we increase our borrowing to support the budget, like we've seen the support that came from IMF? It's a part of the budget support and COVID relief. So at one point, government is also caught up in between a rock and a hard place. I mean, if you don't generate revenue domestically, you continue borrowing, and that money then you will squeeze the people to pay the borrowed money. In which case, it points to the fact that the inability for government to design long-term sustainable interventions to handle such pandemics and other issues is what needs to be worked upon. And like Sarah submitted, government is not in lack of technocrats. The people are there, but to the extent that their advice is taken seriously and implemented by the government is the question we need to ask ourselves. So that's where we should start from. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Robert. Sarah, are you with us here? Yes, sorry, I just want to just ask you a quick one on what options are available to strengthen the economy at this point. And also, we are seeing quite a lot of the increased charges of private hospitals, and people can't handle. People, whatever they say, if we are saying that people will earn, a lot of what will earn will go into health at this point. They can't really handle the bills in the private sector, and now there's nothing also to do in that side because they also hit so hard. So I'm trying to bring it closer here. What options are available to strengthen the economy at this point, but also importantly ensure that we have a smooth health care system?
Yeah, thank you, Damien. There was a petition in court trying to ask courts to ensure government regulates cost of treatment in private hospitals. The High Court has ruled ordering government to do so. But looking at the picture, there is no country where people have shouldered the burden of exorbitant treatment, costs of a severe disease like COVID. As we talk today, costs in private hospitals range, between 80 million to 120 million in a space of 3 weeks, 4 weeks. And unfortunately, most people, their patients have passed on. You know, there is a family which lost two sisters, and they had a bill of 221 million to pay. We see dead bodies being detained by hospitals, something which goes against the Dental and Practitioners Code of Conduct and Council as enacted in 2013, and the Penal Code Act under Section 121 on dignity of dead bodies. Actually, it's a crime to disrupt the burial ceremony of a dead person, and you can be arrested for 2 years, custodial sentence. So we have absence of government in regulation and conduct of private healthcare providers. For long, we have had absence of government in many sectors. The private sector actually thrives on forces of the market demand. Government took literally the policy of privatization and liberalization and thought that they had no duty to regulate. Take a simple example of this COVID herbal medicine, which according to the manufacturer should cost 12,000 shillings. But people are buying it up to 250,000. People are taking advantage because of absence of regulation, absence of government. In a situation of a pandemic, you know, the duty to control and contain a health emergency like COVID has caused is a duty of government. Where you have people who supplement provision of medical care like private hospitals, government is supposed to create a partnership for containment of the pandemic. And the most easiest thing to do would be to provide essential drugs and personal protective gear to private hospitals to mitigate the cost of those who access health care for COVID in these spaces. The private hospitals have no help in procuring essential drugs. They are faced with the vices of the international pharmaceuticals. Government is not aiding them, whereas the national medical stores has a bigger bargaining power to purchase medicine and can access it easily. The private operator does not have that luxury. So if government can come in, but also it's important to underscore the fact that there is absence of COVID medicine in government hospitals. There is absence of oxygen in government hospitals because of corruption and bad governance. But if we have medicine, government should get medicine, estimate the number of COVID patients in these private hospitals, take their essential drugs, take their PPEs. That would reduce and flatten the cost of accessing treatment in these private hospitals. Because government hospitals do not have capacity to absorb the kind of medical care needed at the height of the pandemic. Those are the simplest things to do. Then the others include waiver on taxes for water and electricity, because hospitals use a lot of water and electricity. There is 45% increment on water. These are very simple interventions to make in the short term as government moves to regulate provision of medical care by private operators, as has been ordered by court. But do we have what it takes to do these simple interventions? We have a crisis of governance. Even if these ideas were tabled and approved, the administration and execution would be problematic because of bad governance, which is endemic under the President Museveni's regime. So that is the crisis, but we must move in this direction to save people, save the trauma caused by access to medical care, the trauma caused by families whose deceased persons are detained in hospitals illegally. I enjoin police to move in and implement Section 121 of the Penal Code and arrest hospital owners who are detaining dead bodies, because hospitals can negotiate and obtain commitments for payments and seek redress in courts to recover their costs. other than embarrassing and humiliating dead persons with grieving families?
Thank you, Sarah. And I know possibly Eddie, you will need to share something on this, but I see Clare is off. Eddie, would you want to come in and share your thoughts?
Yes, actually, these are my last thoughts. Actually, corruption, and I want to. I think Sarah is been a bit shy, and she's talking about governance. Let me call it what it is: corruption. When you see the Auditor General, because you see, we are not just criticizing government. Auditor General has come out with a report on what happened to the resources that were given by Ugandans to make sure we recover from COVID and the sectors move on. And there is there's no accountability for this. Now, this oxygen thing, everybody is talking about the people who are given money. I hope they will not come and pick me now. And they didn't even put the oxygen plants. These are the, simple things. And where government has authority to waive, and I want to repeat this. I mean, before I even talk about borrowing money or lending money, but you waive. I know Mr. Semakula was worried that if you start waiving, who will pay the tax? Yes, but you say we can't choke every sector. We got to start somewhere so that some sectors wake up, because people are looking for accommodation beyond Mpigi because they can't even afford and they can't even travel here. So we have a crisis. I want to add corruption on the governance, and I want to state that the cabinet, I think when the cabinet should not just come and meet on vulnerable groups, spend the whole day identifying who are the vulnerable groups in this country at this late stage. We should be talking about policy issues. What should we do to revive the economy? What should we do to revive the sector? What should we do to revive the health sector? And so on and so forth. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eddie. And as we are closing into the final minutes of our engagement, I see our time is fast spent. Quickly, I just want to bring on Victoria quickly. What new innovations, or what are those innovations that you think are in place for you, or what have you thought differently to ensure that your sector survives going forward? Otherwise, we might see many of your agents collapsing. So what innovations are you thinking of to ensure that the sector survives?
Obviously, as a sector, we have to move with the moving times. We'll appreciate that like people currently prefer working from home or working closer to their homes. So you will see the sector moving towards more of investing in residential property or properties further away from the central district, as in further away from the central business district. Then we also seen people embracing more of technology in whatever they are doing, embracing technology in marketing, in management of properties, in communication with the tenants and all those. So we'll see more investment into technology, into easier ways of how to handle the situation as it is. We'll also appreciate that that innovations are also coming in shared office space. There's also shared accommodations as people are now moving towards smaller spaces. You'd find people, like, for example, in offices, people now are seeking for smaller spaces other than what they have been using currently. So their innovations, so it's shared office spaces, shared residences, student living as in accommodation, by also investing in such properties in order to be able to cushion the situation as it is, and also to be able to survive and thrive in the real estate sector. So different people are innovating in different ways that they can be able to survive this particular. Though we are also encouraging, we still encourage the landlords and tenants to continue to dialogue and see how they can continue. Both the landlord survives and also the tenant survives throughout this period.
Thank you very much, Victoria, for those. Almost could be your final take, but I will need to bring in Suuna as we are towards ending into conclusion. We've seen social effects like closure of schools. We've seen places of worship being closed, entertainment venues negatively impacted. Of course, the quality of life and is negatively impacted and having a potential impact on human capital development. What do you think are available options for government to see that this aspect of life is not completely lost?
Thank you very much. It all goes back to the long-term planning for safety nets for such sectors. I'm a fan of this gospel program, and you realize the video in for instance, entertainment sector is trying to reach out to Salim Saleh for a handout. That means that originally there was no specific program for such individuals. So inefficiencies within the entire government has to go back on a drawing board. If this pandemic is to end, if God will sweep us for this pandemic to sustain itself. I see, for instance, property rights and the rest. Who has been behind that arrangement before? Why wasn't it thought through earlier than now? You see, now and this is a policy issue that I love, was revised when they were putting a 12% excise duty on internet. How this is going to be done, to define educational services, to define health services. If I access data from Makerere University for my own use, is it for education purpose? How will you eliminate it, like when I access it from home? See, some of those dynamics are policy oriented. Now the design is saying education and health services. Who is going to differentiate those two? And we're talking about a country with about 52% internet penetration. We are trying to increase and generate access to information so that people can work from home, study from home, and you're making internet data expensive. So it goes back to the drawing board. Get a sustainable plan. That's one. Two, aligning government priorities to the needs of the people. Let these things not stop on paper. Like I always say, you design a very nice National Development Plan 3, putting human capital development as a pillar. Even in the budget, there has been allocation for human capital development. How would you pursue that angle and see that what you put in the long-term planning aspects of the country are being implemented to the core? That's what is lacking. You see? Now we have all our dependents learning from home, but the cost of sustaining internet connectivity is still in the roof. So this misalignment of policies is causing us trouble. We should make sure that our policies are coherent. if you are to introduce policy A, it should be in line with advancing what you are proposing in another policy. If we can, if we can address those mismatches, I think we'll be at a better level than we are now. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Suuna. Sarah, your take on this?
Well, Demian, we are here with COVID. It's a global pandemic. I wish to enjoin citizens to use all their spaces and capacities to push government to make sure the right things and the right or critical interventions are done within this period of containing and mitigating the severe effects of COVID, as well as build resilience to overcome the severe challenges in the post-COVID era. We should make use of Parliament. We should make use of communication channels, radio, television, social media, to make sure government listens and does the right thing. We might survive COVID, but we know that poverty kills, and it can kill faster than COVID. But also the majority deaths of COVID, especially for the vulnerable, are due to poverty. So we must all work together to save lives and livelihood and push government to act and be accountable and responsible. I wish to submit.
Well, thank you very much, Sarah. Victoria, do you have any final parting shots?
Maybe I can say that as the real estate sector, the government should focus so much on the sector. It is, we feel like it's a forgotten sector. There is that assumption that people who invest in the real estate sector are rich. They can easily cushion whatever is going on. That is a very big assumption. But as a sector, we are also suffering. People are not earning. People at home, people are stressed and all those other things. So the government should, in whatever they are doing, in whatever stimulus packages, in budgeting, in whatever the government is planning to do, they should think about the real estate sector.
Oh, thank you very much, Victoria. That was a short one and a quick one. Oh, thank you very much, my dear panelists. Of course, Sarah, regulars I enjoy to be on, and Robert, Clare. Clare, you're back. Are you with us?
Yes, I am. I'm sorry, my connectivity on Airtel just went off. I had to
sorry.
my thing, yeah. But I'm
sorry,
here.
we are into the closure, and I would want to just allow you give us your parting shots on what you think should be the way forward.
This particular session I was talking on real estate, maybe next time you give me an opportunity to talk about construction, because the two are very related. But in terms of closing, what I would say is that regardless of what is happening in the pandemic, we do not lose hope. We continue to push. We encourage people to continue investing in real estate because it is the safest place that you can place your investment. Even if the returns may seem slow, we still encourage our landlords not to lose hope, not to start selling off property. I think the lesson here is for us is to find other sources of income other than the banks to invest in the real estate sector. We also appeal to our government, like Madam Nannozi has been saying, that they should consider having waivers so that they can stimulate the sector. We all know that real estate is a very big economic multiplier. So if they can support our people, as Sarah has been saying, and as everyone else has been saying, then real estate is the place that our people will be able to live, to work, to get educated, you know, all those, we haven't talked even about schools, and yet they are part of the real estate sector. We know that what is happening there is really, really, really bad, but we will not lose hope. We will keep hoping that once this wave is brought down, we can be able to restart and get everything back to as close as possible to normal. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Claire. So, Suuna, let me just bring you in before we close. Yeah, there's something that's just come up on the issue of recapitalizing UDB. Who are these people that would manage to borrow from to borrow this money? Because then, can we see small scale borrowers having the opportunity to have these funds?
Damian, that's where we started from. UTB is supposed to avail money for long-term financing and supporting sectors that are very essential to the economy, that are not able to pull resources together. Now, to the extent that UTB money is accessible to medium and small-scale enterprises is still questionable. And this is where government is trying to bring in other programs. Of course, like they are budgeting for Myoga and the parish model, where they will benefit people in circles and the rest. It is not very easy that medium and small scale enterprise will have good access to the Uganda Development Bank money. Of course, because of the requirements, first of all, in terms of formalization and the arrangement, in terms of pooled funding, if they can afford to be able to pay that money back in time and at lower interest rate as advised. So, and my only thing is that government is trying to put other alternatives to support the medium and small scale enterprises, not necessarily through the Uganda Development Board. Now, what we would wish to see is if those programs are effectively implemented, because we know what happened to Nannozi, we know what happened to Nawagagawale, and we know what happened to Kulembeka and the rest. So when you see these programs coming on board, you should be mindful of what happened to the past programs. Were they able to bring people out of poverty, the guys who are in this medium and small scale enterprises? But as far as my own analysis is concerned, I don't think UDB money is actually intended to support medium and small scale enterprises. It seems to be targeting people who are already at some level of capitalization, and they just need some bit of acceleration to move further.
Yeah, thank you very much, Robert. I see you've left us with a point of reflection on whether these interventions have really paid off. And now we have the Myoga coming through, and all this money is going there. I saw Sarah hinting on this money being used by those who can handle it. It's the same thing that you've just talked about. So I think the small scale people are really still into the struggle, and I hope there will be way out for them throughout this pandemic. It's a point of reflection that we need to have constantly as citizens. And I thank you very much for being with me today. Thank you, Sarah, again, for constantly being with us. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Robert, for accepting to join us again. Claire, thank you for enduring the internet glitches. We hope we shall get the 4G and all the Gs that are being promised, so that we have the best of the internet. And also, Victoria, thank you. And I hope those agencies and the agents out there that are into this business will not kick out our people who don't have what to eat, first of all, and are kicked out of the house. We hope as human beings will need to live harmonious and also help each other throughout this pandemic. And to you, our viewers out there, kindly observe the SOPs. Let's be hopeful, and we know that we shall overcome this. Kindly follow this discussion on our YouTube page at Civic Space TV. Subscribe on there and be part of these conversations. Kindly put in there your comments, your thoughts, and we shall capture them and also improve the space. Thank you, and we see you next Friday. Good evening.